All right. Good morning, Null Channel, wherever you're at in the world. I'm sure it's morning because it's morning for me. That means it's morning for the rest of the world. So good morning. And I hope that your day is either starting well or has already gone well. And, or yeah, I guess you could be on Tuesday. I guess. Worst case, it's not even Monday. I hope your Monday went well. So, anyways, I hope that you're doing well. And I hope that you have a good morning, whatever morning it happens to be. Okay, so let's move on. As always, I like to start off these with just a little disclaimer. I'm not paid by anyone at all. Did anyone ask me to do this? No, nobody's asked me. Well, maybe all of you, since you guys watch this, so that encourages me to do it. But is my employment contingent on doing this? And the fact is, no, it's not. I speak on behalf of myself and not any past, present, or future employers. All opinions are my own. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's yet to be seen. Anyways, just needed to get that out of there. Now that we can get on with the rest of this. So let's talk about next week first. I'm going to do a little bit of an extended one because we're going to go over the news highlights of the last year and kind of talk about the impact. So I'm hoping next Monday everyone has that day off. And if you don't, I'm sorry, but I'm hoping we can have a little bit more of some conversations about how that impacts all of you and how it has impacted you and how it might impact technology in 2021. So that's what our news is going to be about. It's going to be just a little bit longer than normal, probably about, I'm shooting for about an hour. So, all right. So, yeah, definitely tune in for next Monday. Let's get on to the news. So we usually cover security, and I was going to cover security again, but let's be real. All security was about Log4j. Actually, I did see this one tweet about how a reporter didn't really understand what a vulnerability was. That was kind of funny. And next time I'll definitely have that for you. But yeah, most of it was for Log4j, and as you can see, stuff like this. And I would warn you, Log4j is getting a ton of scrutiny right now. So there are people who be like, oh, it must be over for Log4j because another vulnerability was found in Log4j. But that's kind of par for course. When such a bad vulnerability happens, a lot of security researchers check it out, and it gets a lot of extra scrutiny. So yes, they did find another vulnerability. Yes, you'll need to patch again. But that being said, that's kind of to be expected. The Department of Homeland Security finally did something useful and said that you should patch your machines. No duh. Yeah. Anyways, this I found interesting. Microsoft warns that China, Iran, North Korea, and Turkey are all exploiting recently revealed. They're talking about Log4j. Where's Russia in this? Russia's usually right there between China and Iran and North Korea. I don't know what Russia's doing. Where are you, Russia? This is generally your cup of tea. I'm sorry I'm not offending any Russians out there. That's just usually what happens. Anyways, let's move on to cloud news. Cloud news is where it's at this week. Now, you might be asking, why do we have an Amazon page here, and why aren't we talking about outages? Let's talk about outages first. We'll go with the AWS status page right here. Now, I actually got into an argument because I said AWS was not down, and I ran several checks, and this is because I was monitoring stuff in the best coast, US East. And that's usually where the major outages happen, but we actually had a West Coast outage that hit quite a few people. And this happened to be with their networking and their internet to the data centers. And it was resolved fairly quickly. Now, the funny part about this is I feel like Azure, just decided while this was happening to see if anybody was still using their service and to go down just to see if anybody would complain. And it turns out that actually there was 8 people who couldn't work that day. When basically there was 2 problems, but I think the larger one that affected people was Azure Active Directory being offline. So it wasn't actually a full service denial, but there was a while where Active Directory did not work. And then while all of this is happening, Cloudflare had an outage, but it wasn't actually a full-on outage. There was a little while while Cloudflare had delayed requests and a few timeouts, but it wasn't a full outage. But yes, Cloudflare. I know my darling Cloudflare had a outage, and I have to report it, even though I'm biased because I love Cloudflare. So, yep, we had a few outages this week. That's kind of interesting. They all coagulated into a single week. And funny thing here is that Oracle still holds to the fact that it's never had an outage. And like this should make you use it for some reason. But I want to ask you, I want to pose a question to you all. If no one ever uses a service application, can it go down? If no one's accessing it, then it becomes unavailable, and then it becomes available again. Was it actually down? Sorry, it was just, I thought of it like, the thing like, does a tree that falls in a forest make a sound? That's what I was thinking of, and I know. After I said it, I was like, that was dumb, but I had to say it. Anyways. Oracle. I don't know whether they've ever been down. I need to start covering them more. So let's get into what actually happened in the cloud, because I think that there was a couple things that are interesting. So first here, Amazon extends Lex to have CloudFormation support. CloudFormation is basically a crappier but more integrated Terraform. So it only works with AWS, which is one of the things that would make it better if AWS actually made it support other clouds, open source that, and let other people make it support other clouds, but they don't. So anyways, it now has CloudFormation support. So if you do a lot with CloudFormations, you can now use Lex with it. This isn't really part of us. I don't cover a lot of game news, so this isn't but when you're reading this title, there was something that caught my eye that I wanted to talk about with you all. So what I wanted to talk about you all is when you're reading this, add new features to support Linux, usage-based licensing, and Los Angeles Local Zone. So all of this is pretty standard, and I assume that you guys would understand what's going on. But this is a little different. What do they mean by the Los Angeles Local Zone? Well, if you didn't know what it was, and this is why I wanted to cover it, the AWS local zones are basically cloud edges. So they're little mini environments that are more close to a single city. So your big regions, your big data centers are kind of spread out, and you can have up to like 80 milliseconds of latency. And so if you're really wanting a very low latency but still cloud, you're looking at these local zones. So check those out if that makes sense to you. If not, let me know and we can talk about local zones a little bit more in the future. But yeah, that's what the local zones are. So I just wanted to talk about that really quickly. All right, then the other two Amazon things is they're really massive instances. I think my mic is just a little hot. Let me turn it down. I can never decide if it's too hot, too quiet. You guys let me know. Does it sound okay? I think it sounds okay. It sounds okay. We'll continue on. Anyways, their M6Is and their their R6Is, they're really massive compute and memory instances, have extended to new additional regions. Why is this important, you might ask? Well, this is important for a couple reasons. There's only so far you can extend a Kubernetes cluster, and there's some applications that only run on a certain number of instances. Like, for example, you're only going to want to run etcd on 3 to at max 7 nodes. And so if you're running etcd and you need it to be faster, you can't just it doesn't scale by adding more nodes. There are some things that just require larger instances. And I know that sucks, and that sucks that exists and it works that way. But in the end, it works that way. And so having these larger instances is really good. Another thing that people might not even realize is when you're talking about scaling Kubernetes, and you'll be like, oh, you just add more nodes to your cluster. Kubernetes has a hard limit. It doesn't just scale indefinitely to billions of nodes. Actually, it's much smaller than that. Most don't actually run past 2,000 nodes. So if you run in Gke, they don't run past 2,000 nodes. So having larger instances, now you can run multiple clusters, but this just adds more complexity to your cloud already. So this might give you a little bit more breathing room before you have to move to multiple nodes. Another one that really hits home with these larger instances is databases. Most databases, even your document databases, only scale to a certain number of nodes. So even if you're running a document databases that scale out, they a lot of times only run on a certain number of nodes. And so larger nodes can also give you a good throughput. That's another thing that you might not notice. Why doesn't etcd scale when you add more nodes? Well, we can talk about why etcd doesn't scale when you add more nodes. Actually, it's self-imploding. Try to run an etcd cluster with 30 nodes. You probably can't get it to run. The heartbeats would destroy itself. And it has to do with cap theorem for the most part. And etcd provides a strongly consistent memory store. It's not actually memory. It does store it on disk. But anyways, it doesn't matter. We can do that. I can actually make a video on that. That would be an interesting one to make a video on. But we'll get back into the news. But that's a very good question. etcd doesn't scale with adding more nodes. Does not. You let me know if you get it running with 30 nodes or 31. Don't do even nodes. That's just wrong on so many levels. So these big nodes, I think, are important. They're also important. You know what? Another reason. This is one that doesn't really strike home with me. But if you don't run on Kubernetes and you have an SQL database that you just want to scale up, this gives you a little more breathing room before you have to shard it or something like that. That's another good one. Let's talk about Azure. So Azure obviously had an outage. They also made this really great write-up for detecting the log4j exploitation, and it's really in-depth. I read it. I actually don't have any log4j stuff, but it was interesting anyways. I think it's really good to look over these because you can see not only how they're exploited, but how you could accidentally add this type of thing into your own application. So knowing about it, having it in the back of your head is a really good idea. And if you do use log4j, you should definitely read this. It's a really good write-up. etcd is part of the control plane. And this is why you can't scale the Kubernetes control plane past like 7 nodes. You can do it to 9 if you really need the high availability, but I think 9 is hurting yourself. I think 7 is the maximum people really recommend. At least 7 is the maximum I recommend. I recommend you run with 3. I mean, unless if your control plane nodes are so unreliable and so flaky that they go down a lot, then you can go to 5. And then if you're running something that like people die if something happens to it, then I would go to 7. But the thing is with Kubernetes, if the control plane goes down, generally it's not the end of the world anyhow. So anyways, you can get into a whole thing. 9 seems to be ridiculous anyways. Just, yeah, I'll move on, but that's etcd. Maybe I need to do a whole video on etcd. And really it goes into the Raft protocol that does its consensus, is why it doesn't scale indefinitely. But yes, thanks Gregory for bringing up that etcd is part of the Kubernetes control plane. That's absolutely correct. I found this interesting. The public preview of Snowflake for connector for Azure is in public preview. I thought that, it's December, almost Christmas. and they released Snowflake connector. Okay, so I know that Azure SQL is actually something a lot of people use, and there were a lot of general availability updates for December. So if you do use that, I'll leave this link in there because these are probably pretty important, especially since they're around their backups and stuff. They just made the service better. As for Google, we had a couple things. Of course, they had the Log4j stuff, as did everybody. But they had a couple other things. First, they had this no-cost trainings that I guess ends before 2022. The link wasn't working for me, so I can't get to it, but I would check it out if you can. No-cost trainings are always great, so if you're looking to learn, definitely check this out and see how it works. It doesn't work for me. Gke Autopilot. So this is specifically good. So if you're using Anthos for multi-cloud or just your general service mesh, it's now working for Gke Autopilot, which is kind of their Uber managed service, not for the company Uber, but I mean like really managed Kubernetes. So that's really good. It makes Autopilot more usable. I actually have declared Autopilot not useful. That's why I haven't done a video on it and it was too limited. It was way too limiting. It basically ripped out anything you wanted to do. You can't run your own service mesh. You can't run a bunch of your own stuff because it doesn't allow privileged pods and some of these types of things. And so it was very much, here's what you get and go for it. Now that works for some workloads. And if it works for that workload and works for you, that's fantastic. It's a fantastic thing. But, I mean, it is what you get, and there's really no configurability. It seems like they're adding some of the things that were missing, so service mesh was one of them, and since you couldn't add your own service mesh really easily, it made it difficult, so they're adding it, which is good. And then there's also some Zero Trust talks that they gave. You should check those out if you're new to Zero Trust, although Cloudflare does a lot of really good articles on Zero Trust. Moving on. I don't know if anybody knows what Ops Trace is, but Ops Trace is really the only fully open source observability platform. And it joined GitLab, which has two ramifications. One, I hope that it doesn't change its licensing. It's Apache, which I support the Apache 2 license. So hopefully it sticks with the Apache 2. The other thing is, of course, it moved from GitHub to GitLab. So now it's in a worse code hosting solution. I wish they had left it on GitHub. I really like it for open source a lot better. Even just the UI. Looking at the UI, why do I like GitHub better? Look, we have what license it has, where its code of conduct is, where its README is, all of this. GitLab, yeah, I don't know where its license is. I can go and find its license file. It's just not as nice for open source projects. It's fine. It has all of the things, but I like. Anyways, it doesn't matter what I like. This is what happened. You should definitely check Ops Trace out, though, if you're into open observability platforms. Here's something that I kind of found interesting, but I'm not sure exactly what it's useful for. Wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts was. This is introducing the hosted beta experience Red Hat Enterprise Linux Image Builder. That took me a little while to just comprehend what they were saying at the get-go. So this is the public beta of the image builder that is a hosted service. And basically, it's a hosted service that allows you to build your Red Hat Enterprise Linux images. But I don't understand the problem that it's solving. Who has a problem running Docker build? It builds some other images, but all of these images have pretty standard build pipelines. Maybe I'm missing the point. And maybe it solved something really cool. But I just didn't understand what problem it was solving. That's generally how I look at these things when they first come out, is like, what problem does it solve for me? This, I don't really know. So anyways, let's move on from our big cloud news, and talk just a little bit about some random news that I found interesting. I did see that Apple postponed its work from the office mandate, which I thought that the major players the major tech ones have really failed when it came to this, because they never really, they were always like, hey, this date. Well, it's an ever-evolving situation on public safety. And when you have an ever-evolving situation, you can never set a firm date that everything can go back to normal, because we don't know. And if we knew, then it wouldn't be ever-evolving. And so, like, I felt like it's been really stupid, whereas, like, Google and Apple is always like, oh, it's next month. You'll have to be at the office 24/7. And then the next month comes around, they're like, oh, it's going to be next month. Why don't you just say, we're postponing indefinitely until we know more? And that's what Apple did. That's what they did. Thankfully, finally, 2 years into this, it only took 2 years. All right. Sorry, that's my rant on work from home. I feel like a lot of companies have gotten it horribly wrong. Anyways, this is something that strikes true to me. I've been working along these lines with DevOps and GitOps, and working with them in an organization. One of the things that I struggle with as a tech YouTuber is stating things that work for me and saying that they have to work for you exactly as they work for me. And that's just not true. Whether it's how I use Kubernetes, how I run stuff, I think that we can learn from everybody's experience, but also understand that our experience, our product, our company, our culture might not work with another way. And so I think it's really important to see how other people have dealt with it. This is a fantastic webinar. I recommend anybody that has a company that's just getting started with DevOps or whatnot, watch this video. And you know what? Even if you have a pretty well-found DevOps team, I would watch this video. I think it's really good in how the culture is. Gregory, you have a fantastic point. I think I have like a hair in my throat. 1 second. Yes, the solution is to wash it down with coffee, by the way. I agree. I don't know why full remote isn't an option at this point for these companies. I don't understand. I would think that tech companies would be the people pushing this forward. These major tech companies would be the one. I've never understood it. I've worked remotely well before the pandemic. I work in the middle of nowhere, and I've worked for major companies like SUSE and a couple other companies that actually embrace remote work, and I've never understood why Microsoft, Google, and whatnot. Now, Microsoft seems to have a pretty good plan. It's basically up to the teams at this point, and so if your team supports remote work, then it's a go. Which seems reasonable for a really large company to hold it that it's up to their teams, because maybe you're a hardware team and it really doesn't make sense to have remote work, but I digress a little bit there. I agree with you, Gregory. I don't understand. I don't understand how. And yeah, it's office presence is pretty much a joke for 90% of tech workers. It really is. Really is. And the fact that they've been so stubborn with, oh, next month we're going to go into the office and it's going to be mandatory. And why? Why not? Even if your goal, even if you like all of your little people in your fishbowl so that you can sit there and watch them, why not just say, well, when it's time, it will be time, and we'll deal with it. It's annoying me to no end. That's why I even bring it up on the news again. I brought it up a couple times, I think. All right. Anyways, this webinar, if you're new to DevOps, even if you're not new to DevOps, I think is a really good one. One thing that I've struggled with DevOps is not what it is or what it's meant to be, but how to take a company from point A to point B, which I think is the really interesting thing. Everybody starts from a different point A. So you can't say, I can't make a YouTube video. I can say you should do DevOps. But how do you get there? I think that's the really key, interesting part. If you have company A, their culture, their product, all of that type of stuff is probably different. And so just saying you should do DevOps doesn't really mean much. It really requires understanding where your company at. And I actually struggle with this as a tech YouTuber. I don't want to say you should do Kubernetes not knowing where you are, because where you are really matters. At least I think it does. So anyways, that being said, let's get back to the news. Thanks for the good conversation, by the way. Excellent conversation. And if you're not part of the conversation, that means you're watching this after the fact. And you should join not after the fact. I know everybody can't. I tried to do it as time. It would be super early for the West Coast people, and I'm not even talking about people in Hawaii. I completely cut them out of this, or they can join at like 2 a.m. All right, so this is my tech article of the week. This was Scaling Airflow on Kubernetes Lessons Learned. I love lessons learned. It usually means mistakes were made, which means lessons were learned. And this is about scaling Airflow on Kubernetes. Now, you don't have to worry about machine learning pipelines. I know that this is kind of what they were doing here. Well, Airflow pipelines at least. But forget about that. This is about scaling applications, scaling things on Kubernetes. And they have some really good points. I disagree a little bit with some, like the requests and limits. I think for what they were doing, the requests and limits, there are some other ways of doing this. For example, they were talking about scaling jobs up on the same nodes. You could actually make jobs scale up on different nodes, and you would avoid this issue altogether. But the way they did it also works with tighter requests and limits. So it's definitely worth a read, and it's definitely an interesting take on some of these configuration type of things. And so this won my tech blog post of the week. So go ahead and read it. The Internet Association is no more. Well, it is still for like a week and a half, but it's pretty much no more. Everybody is walking away from it. I think it got more flack than it should have, but it is what it is. Nobody wants to be a part of it anymore. If you don't know what the Internet Association is, it's something that was founded by a lot of large companies, and then I guess people just they made some missteps with actually more political image than they did with like policy. Although there was one famous policy that maybe they shouldn't have supported. Yeah, anyways, in the end, it's shutting its doors. So it will be no more. We'll see if another group kind of takes its place. This I found super interesting. Basically, this image shows up differently whether you're on a Mac or any other device, any other real device. I don't know why I don't consider Macs real devices. But it says Hello World or it says Hello Apple. And this comes from this dude, which I'm not following because it was a pretty cool thing that he did. Anyways, this dude, David, I don't know how, I'm going to say Beckham? I don't know. I'm going to just say David. Stick to first names. I can pronounce David. Is really cool. You guys should go follow the stuff that he does. He does a bunch of stuff like this. So basically, this is exploiting a flaw in the Safari and Apple's rendering of PNG images. And he does a ton of stuff like this. The image in this tweet is also a valid zip archive containing a multi-part raw archive containing the complete works of Shakespeare. It also survives Twitter's thumbnail. This is amazing. This is really cool work. So go follow this guy. It's really cool. Some awesome stuff. Good job, David. All right, so this is my runner-up for tech blog articles. And the reason it didn't get my number one was because it's not really tech, but it's more about how to onboard into open source. And I don't think that this is an exhaustive blog article. It does cover 3 really good points, though. So the 3 points are a personal touch, awareness, and documentation. And they go into this in each one of these, and I think it's really, really good. I think that it talks, and why I think it's really good is there's a lot of open source projects that just do this wrong, that don't have large communities because they don't do a good job of this. This is one of the things that I love about the CNCF projects is they all have open office hours where you can join and talk to the other engineers, and it really gives that personal touch, which is one of the secrets. And then having awareness and documentation. These are just no-brainers. If you have no documentation on your code, what's the point? Go look at Rancher's Wrangler. Try to use it. It has 0 documentation. It's open source, technically Apache 2, but it's really hard to use because it has no documentation. And if you tried to get into the project, you'd have a really hard time. And this is not me hating on Rancher or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. It's just the fact that without these things, there's no way to get involved. And so it's really important. I don't really want to talk about this. Microsoft does some stupid stuff. I actually see both sides of this one. They say Microsoft has blocked the workaround. And really what they did is they patched a bug that... So basically, the workaround that they're talking about is there's certain things in Windows that launch a specific app, which in this case launched Edge. It didn't launch the browser, it launched Edge. And so Microsoft patched it so that you can't interrupt. If an app says that it wants to launch another app, something can't intercept that. And I think that that's actually a good security fix. But the specific thing is they shouldn't be making things launch Edge. It should be launching the browser so you can use your default browser for all things. That's the bigger deal here, is that these other things actually launch Edge, not your browser. It's still bad. It's still bad. Anyways, it's whatever. It's whatever. All right, this is quite interesting here. This is embedded software testing with GitHub Actions, and it's a good blog article on testing embedded systems in GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions, I really like GitHub Actions. I really like Drone CD. I really like Go CD. All of those that use these like containers to make a simple and easy and repeatable testing solution. And that's what GitHub Action does. And so basically this is a very in-depth article on testing these things. So if you do embedded software and want to use GitHub Actions, here's one. Here's a good read. Good read. This is a blog article. We're not going to talk too long on it about interviewing via code spaces. I think that it gives some compelling arguments. There's some other things other than code spaces that could repeat similar experiences and give a really good interviewing. So I think it's only like a 2-minute read. You should read it. But it gives a little bit of like why they do it that way and what problems they're solving, which I think are important for you to evaluate. All right. This would have been my number one tech blog article if it was really a blog or an article. It's just announcing something that's really, really, really cool. The Tokyo console. Now, if you don't know what Tokyo is, Tokyo makes the threading library of Rust. There are other threading libraries, but Tokyo is like the main threading library. And the Tokyo console I've actually never seen it for another language, except for maybe if you talk about Visual Studio, like not Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, the big, massive, clunky, takes a minute to load, C++ Microsoft thing, I've never seen anything like this. And this gives you a way to view your threads like you would in your application. And it looks really cool. I actually have I've never seen anything exactly like it though. And I'm really excited to actually try it out and test it a little bit. So anyways, yeah, I haven't gotten to play around with it a whole lot, but definitely I'm very interested in it. I'm very excited about it. Very excited about it. Because another thing that it does is it doesn't require you to trace. It just natively works. So anyways, super cool. Gregory, you always say no to tech interviews. I don't quite understand what you mean. Do you mean no to coding? So if they ask you to code, or are you saying no to just interviewing for tech companies? I'm not quite sure how to read that statement, but we could talk about it if I knew how to read it. So here's the code for it anyways. I haven't really dug into it. I'm still learning Rust, so I suck at Rust. If you've joined my live stream where I learned to code in Rust and suck at it, that's what I do on those streams. All right, so here's another program. This is a CLI tool for finding memory leaks in the web. So I guess we're on to projects, by the way. I forgot to announce that. We're on to projects. And possibly how we say no to tech interviews. I actually would love to hear what you're meaning by that. Always say no to tech interviews. Interviewing is a big part of. I tried to do interviews differently where I work, but it's always really difficult because you're trying to find the right candidate, and so judging how they do it. I do it quite a bit differently, but I would consider it a tech interview because it's still an interview for a tech position. So anyways, would love to know your thoughts a little bit better. All right. So have no idea how to pronounce this. I want to pronounce it fruit, but it is a memory leak tool for your web apps. I don't do much with web apps. Hopefully some of you do. I mean, I guess I do web apps. I just don't do front-end JavaScript-y stuff. All right. This I found interesting. Lens 5.3 was released. I was reading through their release notes, and I got really confused. Like, really confused. I thought Lens was this dashboard. And it is. It is. But it's become so much more than just a dashboard. So it is, yeah, it is just so much more now. Now it comes with like some paid stuff. So like, yeah, there's like some pricing, but I guess what they're calling this is Lens desktop application. So the thing that I thought of as a Kubernetes dashboard is this Lens desktop application, which will always be free. The Lens desktop application is always free forever, although this is not clickable, so I wish it was clickable. So anyways, yeah, they have like personal Kubernetes environments and managed dev clusters, and it's exploding. I didn't realize it was doing so much until I read their release notes. It's doing a lot, so you can check it out. So today, for my project, the thing that I wanted to look at was repositories, image repositories. So obviously we have, the big one, Gke, from Red Hat. Actually, I've never asked somebody from Red Hat. I have some friends. I'll have to ask them how they pronounce it. I pronounce it Gke. I don't really know. Anyways, this is an open container registry. And yeah, anyways, you can run it yourself. They actually have a hosted solution for you if you don't want to host it yourself. Then the next one is Portis, which comes from SUSE, so kind of the two big ones here. Yeah, so you can run either one of these as a container registry. But there's more. Did you know that? I didn't know how many open source container registries there was. There's one from Uber. Uber made a Kraken, a container registry. It's a Docker registry that focuses on scalability and availability. I don't know of any problems with Gke, but this is interesting. I actually didn't know of this until this week when I was looking into these for you guys. I'll have to look more into Kraken itself. Hello, Ernesto. How are you doing today? It's good to see you. But yeah, so Uber has their own container registry for open source peer-to-peer Docker registry. So check it out. Again, I don't know. I mean, it states the problem it solves. I don't know that the other ones have a problem with that, but it exists. So there's Harbor. Harbor, I think, is kind of the classic de facto. If you're not using Gke or Portis, Harbor is the de facto open source. I would agree. So there's been a little bit of a chat on There is some chat going on in chat, and we'll come back to our open source repos here for today. But recruiting is really hard, and I think Gregory is right that personal connections is the best way, but you don't always have the option of personal connections. And if that's the case, then you have to rely on some other method than personal connections. If I could hire everybody that I needed to via my personal connections, trust me, I would. I've already reached out to all my personal connections. But you can't always hire everybody that you need that way. So unfortunately, there exists this need to do it some other way. And all those other ways suck. I agree. It's finding the one that sucks the least. I guess it is the hard part. Personal connections, absolutely. Working with a person in the past, absolutely. Yeah, but yes. Anyways, interesting, very interesting. It's a hard topic, and I don't think that there's a right answer. I've been on both ends, and I see both ends, and I see both sides, why both sides do the things that they do, and I see why they suck, but I generally think that they all suck. Although, having a YouTube channel has let me build connections, so those personal connections are good. I really enjoy them. Mentoring at a local Ernesto is a genius. I'm not going to give you guys eyesore by switching back because I've just done it like 12 times. But Ernesto has probably... I actually know Ernesto. Would hire Ernesto if I could. Like I said, I tried all my local or my personal relationships, but Ernesto does a lot of great things for the community, and he's right. Helping in the community, having your engineers help in the community is a great way to build those connections. And one of the things he does is mentor at a local boot camp. So that's fantastic, and that's a great way of doing it. Thank you, Ernesto and Gregory, for bringing those up. Those are awesome points. Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Thanks for bringing that up, Ernesto. I really appreciate that. Thanks for joining. Also, I've never seen you on my live news stream. I hope that you enjoy it. You're just at the end. We've already covered how both AWS and Azure have had outages this week, as well as Cloudflare had a little hiccup. We're going to give them a pass since they are always so awesome. And it was just a hiccup, not an outage. And because I love them. I don't work for them, and I'm not paid by them, by the way. I do just like Cloudflare, the things that they do. All right. Right now, we're looking at open source projects. I usually do a theme. And today's theme is container registries. So we're looking at some container registries, talking about them. There's actually more than I even realized when I sat down to do this. I thought of Quay, Portis, and Harbor. Those were the ones that I was thinking of when I thought about doing this. And I was like, I'm going to dig into more. I had heard of Dragonfly, hadn't really read into much of it. But anyways, Dragonfly is another one that is another P2P based file distribution system, or image container registry, and it's quite interesting. It's really kind of looks like it's made to be small, lightweight, and kind of like at the edge. So this looks interesting as far as, and I almost think that this goes back to GitHub's, or not GitHub's, but Uber's Kraken. I think Uber's Kraken is also meant to kind of be at the edge. And so I'm definitely going to have to look into these two a little bit more. I never heard of Kraken before this week. But yeah, this is like a virtualization of a small Kraken cluster at work. So yeah, it's kind of made to be like this edge image repository to make image pooling fast. And I guess it's been available for 2 years, and I never knew of it. All right. Yep, so here's Dragonfly. Let's move on. Distribution is another one that I had never heard of before now, and it distributes OCI specifications, so container registry again. Don't know a whole lot about it, but it exists and it's out there, and you should check it out if you're looking at running a container registry. That's it. That's it. So now we can talk more about anything that you guys like. Yeah. Anyways, we had conversations about container registries. That's what we just finished, and hiring and how to do it. Ernesto brought up a fantastic point. Mentoring at local code boot camps is probably one of the fantastic ways. I know that when I worked with Ernesto, some of our best hires were through that boot camp. Yeah, so that's really, really cool that you brought that up, and I 100% agree with that. Yeah. And thanks for joining. Your insights into just about everything is always welcome. All of you have fantastic insights, and I appreciate it. You guys make it fun to be a tech YouTuber, honestly. I have some of the greatest people that tune in and watch. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I hope that this helped you start your week out. If you missed this live, I do leave the recordings up. If you do notice, I don't take down the recordings, but I unlist them because they're not my long form content. But they're all in the playlist, they're all available, so you're more than welcome to watch past ones. I just kind of find the news to be something relevant to this week, maybe next week, and then not relevant anymore, and so I unlist them. But they're all in that playlist, so you have access to the entire history of them. I don't actually take them down. I just make them not pollute my long-form content. Anyways, thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. If you don't mind, if you made it this far, if you don't mind hitting that like button, I would appreciate it. Makes me happy. I actually have a really high like to watch ratio, at least I think, because I only get like 12 people that actually watch the full thing, and I get like 10 likes. So I feel like that's a pretty high. I get a lot of views, but most people just see my ugly face, and then they leave. They're like, wow, that dude's particular. As my mother said, I have a particular face for radio. So YouTube was not my native thing that I was born to do. It's more radio, although I have an annoying voice too. So I'm not sure that really works. I have a voice for video. I need a sound producer. Anyways, I digress. Thanks everyone for joining, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week, and I hope you have a fantastic week, rest of your week. It's Christmas. I almost have a fantastic holiday season. I hope that you guys do drink a lot of eggnog or whatever you do or don't do, and I hope you have some awesome time with your family.